Good afternoon, MACPA members. Welcome to our October Town Hall on this beautiful October fall morning. I hear the temperatures are supposed to continue to get a little bit warmer, so maybe it's not going to feel like fall this weekend, but hopefully you are enjoying the changing leaves and just all of the fun things that fall brings. Wanted to start by thanking our preferred providers, our partners that with us that really enable us to have some of these town halls, these free 1 hour a month events, really keeping you abreast of some of the hottest topics in our profession. I think I failed to do this in the last two town halls, but we have a new board as of July 1st. And so I wanted to share this. We're super grateful to have Christine Aspel as our chair for this year. We've added 4 new board members throughout the profession. Just really grateful for this board of directors that leads our association so well. And then our MACPA Foundation Board of Directors too. We added some new team members there this past, I guess just earlier this month in October at our meeting. And we're just grateful for the work and the insight that they have, especially as we see some of the most important issues that we're facing as a profession really being things that are kind of under their purview when we think about pipeline and retention and diversity and equity and inclusion. So grateful for their support. I've already opened up the polls and I see several of you already in there answering them, which is fantastic. We've certainly created a culture where you guys go in there and do them early, which is awesome. But I'll start walking through as usual. We want to start with our positive focus. I know the last several weeks, our world, there hasn't been a whole lot of positive to view. Right. It's been really heartbreaking and hard to see what's going on in the Middle East and then in our own backyards in a lot of ways as well. And so I do think it's still important to talk about what's going right and positive. That does not mean we ignore what's going wrong and don't have ways to fix some of these systemic issues, but to really take the time to have our mindset, especially when we're going into opportunities where we're learning and being forced to think a little bit differently or creatively, to have that positive mindset. So I'd love to see what some of you all are saying about a recent personal or professional accomplishment that you can share. Someone had their grandchildren visit, which, you know, kids, if you ever are kind of just feeling down, kids certainly bring joy and challenge, but lots of joy. Someone completed their MBA, congratulations. Someone's finally moved into their new house, congratulations. Daughter finding her confidence in middle school. That is something we're celebrating. Middle school, and especially for girls, that is hard. So congratulations. A new puppy, somebody's scheduling a trip to Florida, someone's getting enough sleep. Congratulations to you. 3 of the 4 exam sections done. Congratulations, you're so close. That's awesome. So excited for you and can't wait to have you at our swearing in ceremony maybe next year. Just wonderful, wonderful things to see. Somebody was at the government contractor conference yesterday. They got their 8 hours of learning in. That's fantastic. So, you know, you just look at these and you can't help but smile. Even when we have really tough things going on in our lives, which we certainly all do, focusing on what we're grateful for and the little wins can make a huge difference. I'll move to the next one just to get an idea of who we have in the audience. I know then this gets really small, so I have to make my screen bigger for you all. So we see numbers are very tiny, but it looks like we're pretty split. Well, probably public accounting is winning in this one. Maybe if we had done this 2 weeks ago, maybe those numbers probably would have been a little different about who was able to join us, but pretty split if we add them all up with public accounting, and then we go into private, government, nonprofit. That huge group of retirees, man, we are jealous of you, but we thank you for staying involved and being a part of our profession. Such wisdom that you all have, and that you continue to stay engaged with our profession. We just really, really appreciate. I'll keep us moving, and then I'll open up all the polls at the end. But your position or your level at work, it looks like we're kind of all over the map. We have our retirees out there again. But if I were to kind of add up those manager and above, we have a pretty senior group here. A sole practitioner obviously would be a partner manager, in their role as well. So pretty well spread there. Still no students. We got to get some students on here. Self-employed consultants, some C-suite. So great group of influential and leaders in our profession to have some of these conversations with this morning or this afternoon. And then the last one we wanted to see about is we're continuing to ask this questions to see how it changes and trends over time. But the top 3 professional trends that really are challenging you in the last 6 or so months. And so we'll see these kind of jump around a little bit while people answer. Interesting. I don't know that I've seen, or about as soon as I say something, they always move. But cybersecurity being that high, it's going back and forth with finding talent. But that is interesting. And I'm seeing retaining talent going down the list. Cybersecurity now #1. Very interesting. Finding talent still in the lead, but I think this speaks to a lot of what we're dealing with, right? There's a lot of challenges that we're dealing with in our profession, in just the business world, in just society in general, right? And a lot of these I see, 2 of the top 3 really around talent, really around upskilling, and that the hybrid maintaining culture dropped down a little bit from prior ones, but still pretty high. Retaining talent pretty low. It's interesting. We might have to have some of you put in the Q&A some of your best tips. We're going to have a little bit of conversation around recruiting and retaining talent at kind of the last half of today's presentation. So looking forward to that. And we did have a couple others. So there is a other category. If you had an other, that we'd love to know what that is so that we can start to add it, and because it might be that other people are dealing with those challenges as well. I will keep us moving though, and I'm going to make this back to smaller. And so I just wanted to share this picture because this was my good news. This was on Tuesday night. We had our swearing in ceremony, and 60 new Maryland proud CPAs were celebrated as they took the CPA oath, which was administered by the Commissioner of Occupational and Professional Licensing, Mr. John Dove. It was just a wonderful event. Over 60 new CPAs, but over 200 people in attendance to celebrate and to welcome them into our profession. I was asked last week, I was at AICPA Council in actually California is where we were meeting, and they had us do a survey. And one of the things we talked about were, if I described the profession in 3 words, what would those words be, and what does that mean? And one of the words I chose was community, because the power of this community was certainly on display on Tuesday night. Just the joy of having these new CPAs, their colleagues, their friends, their family there to support them, mentors, just an amazing time, and really glad that they were able to have that real celebration. So with that good news, and excitement in the new CPAs we're bringing into the profession, we did want to talk a little bit today about both the recruitment to the profession and then retention in the profession. We've seen over the last probably 2, maybe 3 years that talent really is our #1 challenge. And that encompasses a whole lot of different areas, whether it's recruitment, retention, upskilling, development, diversity and equity and inclusion, belonging. All of those things kind of come under this human capital or workforce development area. And so at AICPA Council last week, they shared this slide, and then in the red box, I've kind of added some insights that I got from it that I think might be helpful too, and letting you know kind of what is the numbers looking like, what are we seeing, and then where are some potential leakage points or areas where we can focus on as we really try to build up our profession, because our profession is needed. It is essential for our economy and for our society. So they have this funnel of, here's in the US, all the people start in college. Then you have a little slide of people that actually then graduate. And so where I wanted to really focus on is these couple at the end. So you can see that 208,000 people declared an accounting major. Now, these are from various different sources, from different but close by years. So you kind of have to take all of this with a little grain of salt. It's a little fuzzy. But what that means is that then we only had about 50,000 actually graduate with a bachelor's of accounting. And so that's a 24% rate. So only 24% of those declaring an accounting major when they go in to school to actually then graduating with them, only 24%. So we've got a huge leakage point there. What can we be doing in terms of the educational experiences that they have to support them? Now, of course, there's also that starting college and graduating college. So you're going to lose some just in those numbers, regardless of the major. But I think that's something we can focus on. Then you look at those that graduate with a bachelor's of accounting or graduate with a master's. Combined, that's about 70,000. So we have 70,000 what we would call CPA candidates, right? Eligible to then become CPAs, or what we would consider as highly eligible and or on the path of licensure. From that, only we get 30,000 exam takers. So only 43% of accounting graduates are then choosing to sit for the exam. This is not passing the exam and becoming a CPA. This is even just taking the steps to register and sit for the first part. Only 43%. I know that's shocking to people, especially me. When I grew up and went to school, it was like a given. Everybody in my accounting major, we were all sitting for the exam. So we have that dynamic that I think is a leakage point we can focus on as well. And then finally, we have the exam. Now, the exam by design has not 100% pass rate, right? Because it's a test of ability, it's a test of determination, it's a test of aptitude. So from that, we have 19,500 exam passers in any given year. So that's only 28% of exam of accounting graduates and 65% of exam takers. So I wanted to kind of give you some of that data that points to a little bit of the challenge. And that's really the results of the challenges. But here's how we're thinking of challenges broadly. And this has been something I've been working on for, I guess, maybe the last year or more. But there's a lot of conversation about a lot of different challenges or barriers in our profession as we seek to grow it. And so what I'm trying to do is to gather all of those things for you all so that we can communicate and really help you understand what's going on, and then where the opportunities are that we can address these. Not all of these challenges are something that we, yes, I said we, as a profession, this is going to take every single one of us, can or even should do something to address, right? The other thing about these challenges is that they are circular in nature. And this is what kind of made it very difficult when I was trying to gather this all on one slide, is in some cases, these challenges affect both recruitment to the profession and retention in the profession, and then they reinforce each other. So there's a lot of this going on. So that's why I have that circle in the back. But let's walk through some of these at a high level. So demographics, birth rates. The US birth rate has been below the replacement rate since the 1970s. So there is just less people to choose from. Not something that we can really do anything about, right? That is a given. It's a market and demographic kind of restraint that we have to live with. Net migration to the US has also been on the decline since 2017. So whereas maybe we did not feel these talent crunches earlier when we had more immigrants coming into the US, that has now been on decline since 2017. Then we go into, okay, where is the awareness of the accounting profession as a career path? What is our reputation? What is our brand out there in the marketplace when people are, particularly students, thinking about careers? A couple of items that I think were interesting in some studies that were done around this. The CAQ, the Center for Audit Quality, who has an amazing program really to reach Hispanic and Black youth in particular about accounting careers. In their survey, they found that 66% of accounting majors decided to major in accounting in high school. So they had already chosen, 66% had already chosen their major in high school. That is something that we are wrestling with what that means, right? If they are choosing their major in high school, that means when we are reaching them in college, it is too late often, right? How are we getting more present in high schools? And we have several things we're working on at the MACPA and the national level to do this. But one of the things that if we think of challenges too, is when I talk to some of the leaders in our profession now, they often point back to a college account or a high school accounting class. And we just don't have those in our programs anymore. In favor of STEM courses and some of the CTE stuff in high schools has changed. And so one of the things we are doing, and there's legislation in Congress about including accounting in STEM, and then what would that do to really create more funding and get accounting classes back into high schools. The other thing of this lack of awareness that we need to be aware of is that underrepresented communities are less likely in some cases to have a CPA or an accountant as a role model in their life, right? The other thing when I talk to accounting leaders is they point to a father, an uncle, a friend's dad that they saw as a CPA and they started to emulate, right? And so if you go into the more minority populations, that hasn't been the case for them. And so they aren't necessarily following that path. And so that leads us with a diversity, equity, and inclusion issue in our profession as well. So it's very multifaceted. We think about changing mindsets. Those kind of bridge both the recruitment and the retention side. So earnings versus earnings potential. Starting salaries, we're just going to say it, they're not competitive with the other business majors in accounting. And what that looks like can be different and all of those things, but they just aren't competitive right now. We are a profession that have always talked about the earnings potential, right? Not necessarily the starting salary, but the potential of what you can do with an accounting degree and going forward. And we just see that students are just short-term focused right now. And so what does that mean for how we approach and promote our profession? Similarly, the length of service or the loyalty component has completely flipped, right? Whereas a boomer would have stayed in their jobs 8 years or more, we are seeing that Gen Z, so the newest workforce, demographics going into the workforce, are thinking just 2 years. They are much more short-term focused. And so how do we change business models? How do we change communication and the branding of our profession to accommodate that? Then you have, because of that short-term focus and that length of service mindset, the voluntary quit rate. So this is something that the Department of Labor and the government focuses on. Voluntary quit rate has steadily increased since 2009. Of course, with a short exception when it dipped in 2020, when nobody knew what was going on, so everybody was just holding steady. But even when it dipped, it was still higher than 2009 through 2015. So we have that voluntary quit rate. And then the other really interesting thing that we saw during COVID, and you can see it in the numbers, is this boom in entrepreneurship, which is fantastic, right? Entrepreneurship creates small business, it creates clients for us, it creates opportunities, new businesses that need accountants, right? There's nothing wrong with entrepreneurship, but the boom to which it happened, we are seeing the effects of that. So after what is assumed to be the initial decline in 2020 and early 2020, because again, the uncertainty, new business formation actually started to increase in mid to late 2020 in through 2021, and it increased with more than 20% growth compared to 2019 pre-pandemic. And so that was double any growth rate in any other year. This is brought on by technology in some cases, right? You think of like the Etsy's. We have a generation of the side hustle that now becomes the main hustle, where, you know, I can make this thing and sell it online and create my own business. And so it's just a different mindset around work and what that looks like. And then, of course, if I hadn't seen any questions come in about it yet, I know it will. Our regulatory barriers that we have in the profession, right? They exist, no doubt. The licensure process is a barrier, or maybe hurdle it'd be a better word, but and it's of course somewhat designed that way on purpose, right? Now I'm not going to go into all of what we could go into, because again, we could spend a whole 3-day conference on some of these topics. But we need to look at that whole process and really look at the business model and look at the needs of the profession and see what we should be talking about and doing. And then when you think of just on the retention side, just the upward mobility, the skills gap that we have in this digital transformation, that licensure process kind of comes into play there as well. Of course, the complexity and workload compression around the regulatory environment certainly adds some constraints in our profession. And then organizational culture. I think that is a huge part of what you all can do. And that's where we want to spend a lot of time this morning as well, or afternoon. So, but I didn't want to leave you with just the challenges. And I know there's a lot of words on the screen, but this is my attempt to connect and in blue show you all the things that we are working on, right? And you can see there's a whole lot more blue than red. So hopefully that gives you some positivity in the day as well. I'm not going to go through all of these. I did want you to see the efforts that we are doing with volunteers like you, that we're doing through partnerships with other stakeholders, and also just by simply supporting and encouraging and saying great job to great work that other folks are doing around the profession. Ultimately, at the MACPA, we really see our role in this human capital challenge that's facing our profession. And as you saw kind of in some of those challenges, it's not just our profession, it's society broadly. But our role as being within our resource constraints, doing what we can to support, promote, and protect the profession, which is what we were founded on in 1901, and continue to work towards. And then making sure you all are aware of the challenges and, more importantly, the opportunities that we have to address these challenges. That being said, there's a couple I want to highlight because there's some things coming up. One, the Accounting Exploration Unveiling Pathways and Possibilities event. That is on November 8th. If you know any students, high school through community college into college, this is a free virtual event on the evening of November 8th. We have an amazing panel group that are going to have discussions about what it looks like to be a CPA for them. We have Jeff Gehring, the CFO of the Ravens, joining us. We have two brothers that started a small accounting firm focused on just tattoo artists. And so they have a great personality and just a fun way of how they do their business and how they support a business like a tattoo parlor. We have people in government, we have people in accounting roles all over the world coming to kind of share their story. So please share that event with your students that you know in your life and encourage them to attend. The other thing I wanted to make you aware of was the changes to conditional credit. So conditional credit refers to that time between when you got a passing score on a CPA exam and when you would then lose that passing score and have to retake the exam if you did not complete the other exams. So back in the spring, the Maryland Board of Accountancy voted to change that, which was the 18-month rule, to be 30 months permanently going forward. Now, this is a regulatory change, meaning that it has to go through that process before it's actually effective. But once that is done, and right now I believe it's out for public comment, that will then be a permanent change. Earlier this month, the same Board of Accountancy voted that in response to significant health, economic, education, and travel disruptions resulting in CPA exam candidate hardships, this is all around the COVID time period, and coupling that with the anticipated negative effects of the new exam that is starting on January 1st of 2024, any Maryland candidate with CPA exam credits on January 30th, 2020 through December 31st, 2023, so it hasn't even happened yet, will have those credits extended to June 30th, 2025. Now, this was a policy change, and so this is effective immediately. I'm going to read it again. Basically, what happened is NASBA had two, NASBA is the National Association of State Boards of Accountancy. They had two recommendations, a recommendation around COVID hardships and extensions, and then they had a recommendation on there's a new exam coming up. There's always going to be some delays. There's different time periods that you can take the exam and things like that. So we're going to make an extension for that. They had two different ones, which created this weird 7-month gap that honestly we thought would be more confusing to students, right, that are taking the exam, a 7th month gap where they wouldn't get extended. Our board was proactive and said, we're just going to combine that into one. So I'm going to read this again because it's really important. If you know anyone that lost a credit, maybe during this time period, they actually got it back. So any Maryland candidate with the CPA exam credits on January 30th of 2020 through December 31st, 2023 is having those credits extended automatically through June 30th, 2025. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out or reach out to the Board of Accountancy. We're grateful for their leadership. And then finally, I know there's a lot of blue on here that you probably have questions about. I want you to save the date for our January summit. We're going to have our summit, which we typically had done in October. We're switching it to January 5th, virtually for a couple hours in the morning. We are going to focus on workforce development and share more about all of these opportunities. We're going to have some panel discussions. And so I really want to encourage you to save that date. Registration will be opening soon. Save that date and then invite your HR colleagues, those in charge of talent development, to join us for that. That's going to be a free event on January 5th. With that, I know that was a lot. I would love the rest of our time this afternoon to focus on recruiting and retention best practices. And so to do that, we've asked an expert in workplace culture to join us. Erin Moran is the executive director of the Nancy Grasmick Leadership Institute, which is an interdisciplinary research and action-based institute at Towson University. They have some fantastic content. We're actually, at the end, I'll tell you about a program that we're going to be doing in the spring with them. Erin spent most of her 24-year career dedicated to developing leaders who create inspiring work environments that enable people to be fulfilled while also achieving extraordinary business results. Moran believes we create a better society when people work in healthy environments. She spent nearly a decade with Great Place to Work, where she studied leading workplace cultures, helped produce the Fortune 100 Best Companies to Work For list, and advised clients on how to improve workplace culture. She was the Chief Culture Officer for New York City-based Union Square Hospitality Group for 7 years, where she was responsible for overseeing and enhancing all aspects of employee experience for the company that created Shake Shack, known globally for its culture. She has a series of awards to her credit, being named one of the top 50 women innovators in the restaurant industry, a 2-time honoree of the National Restaurant Association Power List of Culture Champions, and Women's Food Service Forum Top Women in Metro New York Food Service and Hospitality. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and welcome Erin to our town hall.
Thank you so much, Rebecca, for that introduction, and thank you so much for the opportunity to join you all this afternoon. I really appreciate it.
So Erin, you heard a little bit about some of the challenges
Yeah.
our profession is facing. But with the folks that we have on today's meeting, we talked about mindset. Mindset was one of those items that we see as challenge. How have you, throughout your career, and maybe what have you seen change in terms of both the mindsets and then the needs of talent these days?
Sure. So if we go back even as recently as 10 to 15 years ago, in terms of what the workforce was looking for to be recruited and then to stay with an organization longer than the 2-year time frame that you've referenced,
yes,
it was more of a transaction. So it was about how competitive is your offer. Base compensation, variable compensation, any long-term benefits that would be connected with retirement planning, and then your health and medical dental benefits, right? So it became a negotiation between the company and the talent in order to go back and forth and just kind of put more money on the table. And you could, in most cases, win the war for talent by putting more money on the table. And as we know, you can feel and touch money, and you can measure it. Mm-hmm. And then how to keep that talent. That was all about career progression. So I get a promotion and I get more compensation and more access to benefits. And that's how you bought loyalty, going back 10 to 15 years. Right. That paradigm, that approach no longer works. So you mentioned in your 2 slides ago, kind of the importance of culture, and almost every single study that is conducted indicates that the number one reason why an individual will choose to work for an organization, accept that offer, or the number one reason why talent leaves an organization is culture. And culture can't be touched. Yeah. It can be felt, but it actually really can't be touched, right, or really effectively measured. So it's a lot more nebulous. Mm-hmm. And speaking of studies, a recent study indicated that 70% of talent under the age of 40, the number one reason for that they're considering in terms of assessing prospective employers is that they have a sense of purpose. And 2/3 of those individuals would be willing to accept a significant pay cut to work for an organization that has a sense of purpose. And again, that's something that can't be easily measured or described even effectively.
Yeah.
And so that's what we are seeing is a huge dynamic change. You mentioned the birth rates decreasing in the United States, except that globally, we are seeing an explosive population growth. And it's kind of frightening to believe this, but 60% of the world's population is under the age of 40 right now. So this is a driving force that we are experiencing.
Interesting. Yeah. And I love that you brought up that purpose. So one of the things that we are working on, and it was in one of those blue lines, was a CPA purpose campaign. So our current chair, Christine Aspel, really inspired us to think about something that KPMG actually did back in 2015, 2016. And it was an internal campaign, which I think that speaks to of having people recognize the ultimate impact of their work and therefore the purpose. That I'm not just filling out this spreadsheet to do this thing. So, but what does that mean down the line? And so we're going to be gathering some of those purpose statements. We did that at our Women to Watch Awards. And I just met with our marketing team this week of how do we empower and help our members, those of you on this call, to remember your purpose, to reflect on it, because in the busyness, it's real easy to forget about the end impact. And then how do we then amplify and tell those stories, right? Because the work we do as CPAs is absolutely purposeful. And I think in the day-to-day work, sometimes that gets lost. So I love to hear that they're about purpose, because we want to be about purpose, because we believe in CPAs. We believe we do have an amazing impact on our economy and our society, and just the well-being and flourishing of people, right? Well,
and I'm glad that you brought up Christine and KPMG. And you referenced this in my bio, but I spent 10 years working for the organization that produces the 100 Best Companies to Work For list. KPMG and all of the big four accounting firms have consistently been recognized on that list. And for those of you that are not familiar with how the list is produced, it is produced by surveying the employees that work within those organizations to measure the levels of trust. And so the big four accounting firms have been able to really define their purpose and then also connect people's day-to-day jobs to the larger purpose.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the more we can do that at all levels, I think that's super important, because, we are busier than ever. And yet taking the time for, especially for a new hire, to onboard them to that purpose, help connect the dots between the thing that they're doing now to the ultimate impact of that. So important.
Absolutely.
So what have you seen, as this mindset and complete change in what we need or what talent is asking for? What best practices have you seen be adopted in this kind of nebulous thing of importance of culture? What are some practical things you've seen done?
You mentioned one of them actually just recently, Rebecca, which is the power of storytelling. So it is one thing for an organization to define its purpose, its reason for existing, and perhaps even the values that the organization espouses. It's a completely different thing for people to experience that consistently throughout call it the employee life cycle.
Right.
So in order to bring that to life, making sure that not only on day one does that new hire understand the mission, the purpose, the values, but perhaps even in the recruiting process that you're helping people to understand that, so that you're starting the messaging with the outreach. Maybe it's even based on the questions that you're asking the candidate. Oh, and by the way, we need to move really, really fast to get talent in this new era. Our systems need to be really fast to apply on, and we have to get back to candidates as quickly as possible. And that's something that we're seeing in this kind of accelerated pace that we are experiencing. So a faster recruiting cycle, but then going back to your point earlier, the power of storytelling. So if you have this mission, if you have this purpose, if you have these values, how are your people living them? How are they experiencing them? So having individuals within your organization talk about that, and potentially even talking about it in call it, promotional videos, where you don't script them, you don't, tell them what to say, but you might just ask them the question, what do you appreciate about your experience working here? What do you think about working here? And then getting them on a video and then promoting that on social, so that people can, because people will tend to believe a complete stranger on social more than they might even believe our marketing or recruiting efforts.
Wow.
Because there are such low levels of institutional trust here in the US and globally. It's at an all-time low, but people will believe other people that are working in the organization. And so that's a trend that we're seeing a lot more of. And the storytelling works both externally, but it also works internally, because when people see their peers and colleagues speaking favorably about their experience, it helps to create more positivity and more pride in the purpose and in the organization.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's changing from, here's our values. We have a cool mural on
Yeah,
the wall of
right.
we do this to this, like, okay, what does this look like in practice
Right.
and at all levels?
Exactly.
So it's not just this top down, here is our culture.
It can't
has
be.
to be this. Yes, absolutely. Hearing from folks and how it's lived.
Yeah.
That's awesome. What, as organizations are struggling, both recruitment and retention, where would you say are the most important areas for them to really focus on? Because, think of culture in so many different ways. Where would you suggest, with someone with limited resources, where should they really focus?
This might seem a little self-serving, considering that we are a leadership institute. But really, it is about leadership development. Oftentimes we hear from leaders or organizations, we don't have the time or the money to invest in developing our leaders. And I would argue to say, how could you afford not to? When SHRM estimates that the cost of losing one individual is approximately $45,000. Right? If you're going to put the effort into attracting them, but you can't keep them, think about all of the costs associated with bringing a new person on board, with the institutional knowledge that goes out the door, with the need to not only hire them, but then onboard them and to skill them up and to upskill them, right? $45,000 per individual that leaves. If you have managers on your team that aren't able to deeply connect with their direct reports and to help to inspire them and their performance, and they don't feel that, if individuals in the organization don't feel that they are seen or that they matter or that their contributions matter, when it is a talents market, why would you stay, right? You have thousands of other alternatives, including the gig economy, right? To do whatever you would like. Why would you choose to stay? You wouldn't, right? So you'd leave. Who has the most influence over an employee's experience? Their manager.
Absolutely.
Right? So, and we aren't born with the skills to be an effective leader or manager. Those are all skills that need to be taught and intentionally developed and practiced.
Absolutely.
And so that is really what the best way to be able to invest in retaining more people. And when you're retaining people and they're staying there by their choice, right? Not because they feel like they don't have options, but by choice, those people who stay become your brand ambassadors. Absolutely. They are the ones that are promoting the positive culture. So invest in leadership development.
Yeah, no, that is so well said. It is, our profession and most professions, you get really good at some sort of technical thing, and then they get that's taken away from you, and now you manage people. You never were taught to do that. That's a whole different skill set. So how we really invest in our leaders, and I know it's said that people don't leave organizations, they leave managers, right? That is so key. And yet we know in this talent environment where we are all so squeezed for talent, managers in particular are squeezed because they're doing the work of people that would have been underneath them.
Right.
And so it's taken the time to really,
Right.
I know we see that too, like, oh, it'd be great if I had time to go to a leadership conference, but you got to make the time. We got to figure out how we build that capacity.
And I also think we need to create the space and the opportunity for individuals who simply aren't wired for management and leadership to continue to be promoted, even if they aren't managing people. Because too often we do promote people that are exceptionally skilled in a technical area into management, whether or not they want it, but because it's the only way to advance professionally and to increase your compensation, most people say yes. But if it's not their jam, do not force them into those roles.
Right, because they're not going to be great managers if
No.
it's not something that they even wanted to.
Nope.
Right. So how do we, create alternative career growth paths?
Exactly.
I
Yep.
know that's one thing that firms have discussed for years, and
Yep.
they have made different sort of, because when you think of not just the managing people, but business development for a firm, right? Some people that is not their jam and not their strength. But man, are they technically sound, and we
Right.
need them around here. So how we think about business model and career paths differently, I think absolutely plays a role.
Yep.
You saw that we had a lot of smaller organizations, whether that's smaller firms, nonprofits, real tight with resources, or even our sole practitioners.
Right.
They don't have talent they're maybe hiring, but they're probably working with folks, partnering. Where would their most effective and efficient strategies be for them? Anything that you've seen really successful in kind of the very small organizations?
Yeah, it's interesting. This is going to sound really simplistic, but I think it is all about connecting with your people and making sure that you are making the time to listen to what your people are experiencing and to understand who they are as full human beings, to share with them how you are feedback consistently, not just during the annual review process, but let them know what your expectations are and how they're measuring up on a consistent basis. And then making sure that they are getting recognized in whatever way is appropriate to them for the work that they are doing. So oftentimes organizations say, well, we're so small, we don't have a strong HR department or strong talent management. In some cases, the stronger that function is, it takes some of the responsibility away from that frontline manager, right? Because there's so many processes and structures in place for the annual review and, all of that, the process, and not perhaps as much focus on the people. And another thing that I've seen smaller organizations do is stay interviews. Oftentimes HR conducts exit interviews, but by then it's too late. And also, by the way, people are not going to tell you the truth when you're doing an exit interview because they typically don't want to burn the bridge. But if someone in this hot market, if someone is choosing to stay with you, then have a conversation and ask them why, so that you can keep doing the things that is keeping them there. And then if they happen to offer up some things that are annoying to them, at least you have a better sense of what is concerning so that you have the option to be potentially doing something about that.
Yeah, absolutely. As you were talking, I'm thinking, some of these culture things probably are easy to implement in smaller organizations, right? Bigger organizations, you got some hoops you got to jump through. That's just kind of the nature of a larger organization. But when you have a small organization, get everybody on board, get everybody together to talk about some of these things and really get the chance to design
Right.
together what that culture should look like and what
Right.
that feedback system should look like. And
Mhm.
I know sometimes it's seen as, I don't have an HR leader that's going to do all these things and these fancy trainings, and we don't have the resources or money, but having the flexibility and the freedom to be a little more agile as a
Yep.
small organization really does pay off as well.
And developing authentic relationships with your direct reports doesn't require HR.
Right.
It requires intentionality and care.
Absolutely. Yep. And that you get to see sometimes in the smaller organizations, just because it's a little bit easier to do, right?
Right.
Just you end up living with those people in some ways a little bit more than if you were all spread out or something like that. The next thing, because we talked about leadership development and how important that is, I wanted to see those that you see going through your leadership development curriculum and courses. What skill sets, what attributes do you see are making the biggest difference in then that leader's ability to recruit and retain talent? What are you seeing in, if they couldn't invest in a whole week-long training, what are the skill sets that really make a difference in being able to be a leader that attracts and retains talent?
Yep. So the first thing that I'll say is that we offer 1 day and 2 day programs. So even if you can get like just 1 day, please check us out. And the biggest thing to your question, Rebecca, is emotional intelligence and effective communication. So different people receive information differently, and it is your job as the leader, as the manager, to ensure that your team members are receiving the message. So it doesn't mean you can send the message the same way to everyone, right? You need to be able to customize the delivery of that message to each person. And that takes time and that takes thought. So it is, you might say that it's less effective because it's taking more time. But when you think about having to repeat the message or clean up messes or repair trust or relationships, it is more effective. In order to communicate effectively, you not only need to know who your team members are, which we just talked about, but you also need to know where you are in that moment in time. So that's where the emotional intelligence comes in. If you are fired up, then that might not be the time, right, to engage in a specific conversation. Or maybe you don't fire off that email. Maybe you have to take a moment in order to kind of reset, and then perhaps knowing who that person is and knowing where you are in your, emotional intelligence, maybe you say, I'm not going to actually engage in this conversation over email. I'm going to sit down with this person and I'm going to kind of tee it up in advance. So just thinking about kind of the context of the message that you want to communicate, the relationship that you have with that individual, the method of delivery, right? The communication. When I was with the Great Place to Work, that when we did the survey of the most trusted organizations, the most tightly correlated statement to the overall statement of taking everything into account, I would consider this to be a great place to work, was about leaders effectively communicating. So when leaders effectively communicate, then so many other things about employees' experience are improved. But communication is a skill that needs to be taught and learned and developed and refined because it's very nuanced.
Very nuanced. Yeah. And you made a great point about people need to be communicated to differently, right? And in my strategic planning work that I've done with firms, no matter how great the firm is, how many times we go back, communication is always on the strategy list. Like, how are we going to communicate better?
Right.
And I've heard it say, tell them 7 times or 8 or 9, like say it again until it feels like you are saying it for the 1000th time and you can't imagine that they didn't hear it, because people forget. Reinforcing all of that, I think is so important.
Well, and think of how many messages we receive throughout the day, given the volume of information that we receive as human beings. So it makes sense.
Yeah, it gets lost. And transparency in that message where possible, right?
Yeah,
That's not
absolutely.
always possible, but I know that that's something that especially the younger generations are really looking for and expecting
Right.
in organizations. We think of ESG and the movement towards some of those things, and what that looks like in terms of communication of
Right.
those items and how you're going about that.
And speaking of transparency, we can't give all of the information, obviously, but if we can't give the information, we should be able to explain why.
Mhm.
Because when we don't explain that, they think we're hiding something.
Right. Explain the reasons for it. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we are coming up on time, and I did have a couple things I wanted, and I do see 2 questions. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again, because I did want to make everybody aware to, one, we talked about the save the date for January 5th, where we're going to go through all of those blue items that I know that you were trying to look at real fast, but just there's tremendous work being done for our profession collaboratively throughout the country. And I want to make sure that you're aware of those opportunities. So January 5th, we're really going to do a deep dive into that. But also save the date, May 15th and 16th. We're going to be doing our MACPA Leadership Academy, and we're partnering with the amazing Dr. Nancy Grasmick Leadership Institute this year for that. And so taking their really top-notch leadership development training and kind of giving it the CPA profession flair, I'd like to say. We're going to be doing some things around trends in the profession that we need to be aware of as well, but being there together, focused on what does this leadership development look like for the accounting profession. So really, really excited about that on May 15th and 16th. So save the date. The link to register and things like that will be coming shortly. All of this work, all of that blue you saw before, even our Leadership Academy, that's all really funded by our MACPA Foundation. So I had to give a shout out, thank you to our donors. Your support really enables this. This is the #1 challenge our profession is facing. And so if you're able to support, you're supporting scholarships for students, you're supporting us going into those high schools, exposing students to the profession earlier and earlier, and partnering with great organizations that are doing fantastic work. I mentioned the Accounting Pathways and Possibilities event that's coming up on November 8th. Please, please, please tell any students in your life about it. Check it out for yourself too. Tune in and hear about the amazing, very different and diverse career paths that accounting has to offer. I do see some questions in the chats that I want to answer. And I did just open up a last poll around what are your biggest insights or takeaway from this afternoon's town hall. So one of the questions is, how many years post-graduations are the test taking and passing stats? That is a question I actually don't have the answer to. Some of those stats came from various different sources that the AICPA pulled together, but I can look into that. The next was, when does the regulatory change take effect that extends the CPA exam credits earned from January 30th, 2020 through 2031-23, good through June 2025? That was not a regulatory change, that was a policy change. So that is in effect now. So if you lost a credit during that time, reach out to the state board. You should be granted that through June 2025. And then, can a recent graduate rethinking their profession attend the CPA student event? Absolutely. We want anyone to attend that CPA student event. You are more than welcome. It's a great program that we're doing in conjunction with the Virginia Society of CPAs and the North Carolina Society of CPAs. But we invite anyone to attend. It's a free virtual event, hearing about different careers. And the last thing I'll just encourage you to do as we wrap up is to think about that purpose. I know we started, Aaron talked about that, and we are really examining how we can help our members reconnect to that purpose. but just to take some time today, maybe get outside and take a walk in this beautiful weather and reconnect with the purpose of why you became a CPA. And then think about how you might be able to share that message with others. So with that, I thank you so very much for joining us for our October Town Hall. Thank you so much, Erin, for being
Thank
with
you,
us.
Rebecca.
Really looking forward to working with you all in May for our Leadership Academy. And we will see everyone next month. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.